Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be talking about patterns. Now, my favorite thing to make, honestly, are stuffed animals. I'm not sure why, they just are. But when I'm making stuffed animals, like I've been buying pattern books to base the stuffed animals on. And when you keep buying pattern books with the same category, eventually the same type of project is going to keep popping up. So, like, because I'm buying stuffed animal books that are, like, centered around animals, the same animal, like, there are a couple animals that seem to pop up every time. Like a cat, dogs. I see rabbits and foxes quite a bit. But the one that keeps catching my eye, that somehow seems to find its way in every time, are turtles. So, I personally find turtles to be adorable. I mean, there has been some association with turtles with the organizations I've been with in the past too. But it was like, I recently went through like my mainstay pattern books regarding stuffed animals, and like some of the later books don't have turtles in them because like I had to make a conscious effort to go out and get pattern books that have animals that I don't have patterns for yet. But even so, I have 5 different patterns between my knitting and crochet books for turtles on how to make a different turtle. So in this video, I'm going to make them all. I'm going to make all the different turtle patterns, explain like whether I made them, like most of them I have not made before because like the first turtle pattern I got was the one that I like latched onto and kept making because I thought it was cool. But we're going to make the different turtles. We'll see how they all compare. I've got a pound of green yarn, so we're more than covered, I believe. And we can just make the turtle and see how it goes. So yeah, I'm going to start with, I think I'm probably going to go in chronological order for me, is how I'm going to split this up. And if I remember how it goes in chronological order, I know which are the latest books, I know which is the earliest book. It's in between there that's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, we're going to make turtles. And we'll start now. I don't know how successful I was in getting them all in frame, but all the turtles are made. And things did not go according to plan. I actually have 7 turtles instead of 5. Because while in the process of making all these turtles, I had 2 turtle patterns shown to me on the internet. So it's like, what the hell, let's add them in, right? And I also did not make them in the way, like the order I was planning on making them, because shortly after I started doing this, I ran into some health problems with my wrist, and I had to make them in a different order because I thought knitting was going to aggravate it, so I had to switch to crochet, and then I didn't realize that crochet was also going to aggravate it, so because the last time I was in this position, crochet didn't aggravate it. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? And here's our first turtle. This is Charlie the Turtle from Cuddly Animals to Crochet. And this was my first time making Charlie. He was made in several different parts. The different limbs were all different, and then the bottom and the head and the shell split into the different parts of the hexagons there. Now, the good news with Charlie here is that Charlie ended up pretty freaking cute, right? I mean, his head is to the side, but that's actually how the pattern had it, so yeah. I'd say making the limbs themselves were fun. Making the shell, not as much, because, like, crocheting the shell was fun, but then I had to sew it all together. Like, there came to a point where I ended up stopping, and I worked on some turtles at the same time. So midway through the shell, I gave up on Charlie to start work on the second turtle. But it's like, when you get to the actual turtle thing, like, if I had made this in multiple different colors, the shell could have really showcased that. It would have been really cool. Yeah, I mean, I would make Charlie again. It probably wouldn't be my first go-to for making it again, but I would be willing to make Charlie again. I do find it kind of off-putting that Charlie does not have a tail. I guess I understand the tail would have gotten in the way for Charlie, but I was kind of hoping he would have more of a tail. You can see just the legs are the bottom. After that, we had Tina the Turtle from Crochet Cute Critters, and it was the first time making Tina for me. Very simple, no frills, basically just all the stitches for the general body parts, and they all went together just like that. Unlike Charlie, Tina did have a tail. So this is Tina. Tina was advertised as very quick, and the author was right about that. Tina was relatively quick to make because all I had to worry about was just 4 legs and then the head and whatnot. The head is very disproportionately big, but amazingly, the head doesn't topple down. Like, I can put Tina down, and I don't have to worry about her head going like. I did make an extra leg by accident. I lost one for legs, and I made a second leg, and I ended up making 5 afterwards, and then I ended up taking it apart to make it for another turtle. It has all the different parts, and while Tina is very quick, I do find her to be somewhat boring. Style wise, you know, just like all the different types of turtles that we have. This derpy little turtle is La Tortue from Crochet Kawaii. It's pretty small and a little bit more stylized. The 2 shell parts were different, plus then everything else was relatively small and easily done. This turtle I was following a French pattern for. I don't really understand French, so I'm actually impressed I was able to get the turtle to look relatively like how it was supposed to. With the language breakdown, I would say 5 of the turtles I followed an English pattern for, then this one I followed the French pattern for, and one of them later on I followed a Spanish pattern for. The German book that I have does not have turtles in it. And I would say this one's kind of awkward, but then again, that's kind of that book's MO, is the animals are a little bit awkward. And like the other 2 patterns, I would say I had no problem following whatsoever. This one, there were some questions. I had to look up this little ridging here because I think I sewed it together. Yeah, I sewed it together. These are 2 separate parts that had to be sewn together, and the sewing together was kind of awkward. And I was kind of worried about the head, like, not supporting itself, but I was able to, like, sew the entire neck to make that work. I had the little parts. Once again, there's no little tail. I think there could have been room for a tail. And it has kind of an awkward face, like, I think I sewed on the mouth after the fact. The eyes I definitely put in beforehand because they're safe. I use safety eyes, and like I was able to get the eyes in it. It was a pretty small turtle. Yeah, I mean, I had problems with other patterns from that book, but this pattern from that book I didn't really have a problem with. I would make Little Turtle again. Here's the pattern for the first turtle I ever made, the Patrick Turtle with the knitted toys. And it proved to be the longest pattern that it took me to make, simply because it had the most pieces to it. Here we have our patchwork turtle. This is the only turtle out of the bunch that were knit. The rest were crocheted. This was also the first pattern I ever worked from when making turtles. So I had made many of these from the past. And overall, I would say this is a very cute, realistic looking turtle. Like, I'd say the other patterns are more stylized, while this one is probably the closest to what a turtle would look like in real life. However, it was also the most intensive to put together, because if you look at the pattern here, every single one of these hexagons is separate. I had to make like 22 pieces, or at least like 22 pieces, to sew them all together. And the less I have to sew for a pattern, the better. It's not because I don't know how to sew, because I do. It's just I get very bored while sewing compared to working the other stuff. So I'm a lot more likely to give it up during the sewing portion of a project than I am during the knitting portion or the crochet portion. That being said, like, I've made these patterns like several times, so I know to like sew it together, make it floppy. It has all the different parts, and like, I did make it all in one color, but if I'd made this in multiple colors, it would have looked stunning. Yeah, it was around this point that I realized I was running out of the yarn. Which is why I tried to make all the turtles the same color while making them, so that way I could compare the actual stitch patterns and whatnot. It was around here that I realized I might actually be running out. I might have one more pattern. I mean, obviously, I don't think, like, in the past I would have said, yeah, I would have absolutely made this again, but now that I made the other turtles, I don't think I'm going to be as quick to go to this one, simply because of the amount of work involved. I mean, I will be making this again at some point, but I may make one of the other turtles first. This is our first online pattern. This is the Easy Jumbo Turtle tutorial from Flora Crochet. And while the other turtles beforehand were more of a land animal type of leg, this one's more of a sea animal type of leg because it has flippers instead. Now, ironically, despite being called the Jumbo Turtle, this happened to be the smallest turtle that I made. And that's because I don't think I used the type of yarn that the pattern maker was expecting me to use. So when I'm watching a lot of these like turtles online, like people make these turtles online, they use like the really chunky, fluffy Chanel yarn, like the Bernat blanket yarn. And that's not what I use the yarn. I use like the Karen 1-pounder yarn. And that being said, this absolutely qualifies under simple projects. The simple project is when you want to make something and you just want to be quick, you don't want to think too hard about it, just so you can just like make it to reset because you've been working on a really hard one. This is it. And honestly, I wasn't expecting it. This may have been my favorite pattern from all the ones that I made. It was like super simple and quick, but unlike the other ones where like the legs were cylinders like stouts, this had more of like the flipper thing, which was closer to like what the turtles are like. And even though like I sewed them on, and like I had the tail, like it has the tail and whatnot, I sewed them on, and like the head is a little bit big for it. I think it might be Jumbo because of the head. It's really freaking adorable, man. Like, this is just like a cute turtle, like turtle. It's good, like, here, I made you a little something. Here you go. And it's like super quick too. I'm definitely going to be making this again in the future. And full disclosure, I didn't watch the video while making it. I found where the video put the written pattern, and I followed the written pattern for it because, I mean, I can process things a lot quicker through the written pattern than I can through the video. This is a second online turtle. It's the Amigurumi turtle free crochet pattern from Little Crochet Farm, which actually did not have no sewing in the title, but I think I clicked on a hyperlink that said no sewing, so I obsessed about that a little bit later on, as you're going to see. And also the materials for it prominently say no sewing. This was actually the last turtle that I started, but it was the second to last one that I finished, which is very much like the Beatles' Abbey Road, Let It Be albums, which is why it's a different color than the rest. I mean, it looks kind of grayish on the screen, but I can promise you that in person, this looks like a mint green. I did put on the head upside down compared to how I wanted to put it on, but it worked out anyway because Mom had already claimed it as her grandkid, and she was able to dress it up for the wild card game. I do feel like it was upside down. Like, it was a multicolored pattern and I just decided to do it in one pattern. I feel like if it was a multicolored pattern, this would separate itself from it visually, and this wouldn't, the fact that this was so big wouldn't be distracting me from it so much. But I feel like it should be more like that. The fact that I was able to get away without sewing these things on, I was just able to crochet them in, so cool. And also, like, when you crochet something in like that, you know it's not going anywhere. It's not like sewing where it's just like, oh, just snip it off, like whatnot, like you're not sure if the yarn's gonna hold. It's like, no, the yarn, like, it's secure in there. That being said, it's very ironic that this was called the No Sew Turtle, and there was a whole section on sewing the eyes. Like, why? Like, no sew means you don't pick up a tapestry needle. It doesn't mean you have a separate section for sewing the eyes. I was able to get away with it because I just put in safety eyes. But because of the way that the person wrote the pattern, like the way the person wrote the pattern, they wrote it so that you sewed the eyes afterwards. It didn't really put in the pattern where to put in the safety eyes, or to put, which if you're going to go no sew, I assume that's the route you're going to go. But also, I mean, like, you would put in the safety eyes before you would stuff, and it did not put that instruction in before the stuff. And I mean, I didn't read the instructions all the way through before I started working on it, and I assume there are plenty of other people like me who just did that. So yeah, I could imagine, like, yeah, it's their fault for not reading it through, but you also kind of have to account for people like that, yeah. It is a little bit wobbly, but that kind of makes it cute. And, like, it does have a tail. I do like that fact that it does have a tail. And I do have to give props, again, for how clear the instructions were. And I do have to also give props that despite the whole, like, not sewing things in, the author did provide a link to, like, the pattern, and the link for the pattern also had links to videos for, if you don't know this technique that I'm talking about, here's where you can find it, which really smart, really good in that respect. Like, it made it very, very beginner friendly, and this pattern in general, I would say, is beginner friendly. This is Darwin Tortuga from La Banda de Pica, and Darwin had the most memorable flavor text. He was named after Charles Darwin, who his uncle was apparently very good friends with when he visited the Galapagos Island. And Darwin can't help but mention that every time he gives a tour. on the Galapagos Islands. And here's Darwin. Now you can see Darwin is not just green like all the other turtles, because this is where I lost the game of Yarn Chicken. Darwin was the 6th one that I started, but the last one that I finished because I forgot to make the boots, which the boots come off because the pattern didn't tell them to sew. Darwin was also made using a Spanish pattern because of the book that I used for that. However, I don't think Darwin could have been made with one color because of the way the instructions were worked. So I just decided to use the green for the head and the other colors for the rest of the body. So almost to create like a ninja type of turtle, which, I mean, oh my gosh, we haven't heard of Ninja Turtles before, have we? I've actually never watched an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know if I'd like it or not. They never really appealed to me when I was younger, so I never really searched them out, but they were kind of just around. I might appreciate them more now, who knows. But I do have an art history teacher who says that the 4th turtle shouldn't have been named Donatello, but Titian, because Donatello is artistically not up to par with the other 3, like Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo, like Titian is. Art history nerd problems, am I right? The book didn't really provide a good back picture of Darwin to put it on. Darwin had a lot of sewing to do, which was, I think, part of the reason why I started the other turtle versus this. There's just so much going on. But the pattern was relatively easy to get on, and I mean, this is definitely more, unlike the others, which kind of look more turtle-esque, this is more like, this is a human-esque form with the turtle head and a turtle feature. And like, it has the little tail, which is nice. And unlike the others, I mean, Darwin actually has clothes. Like, as I mentioned, the shoe comes off, which is kind of like what that particular designer does. I think is Jan Schenkel. Yeah, what Jan Schenkel does. Like when I made the ram in the Spanish crochet video, like I gave that to the little kid. And like I spent a lot of time on the overalls. The first thing the little kid did was take the overalls off. Just like, okay, all right. But yeah, Darwin turned out adorable. And like, fortunately, the instructions were clear. And also, like, as a side note, it was amazing that like, even though I was reading in Spanish, which I'm not entirely familiar with, but I'm familiar enough with, it was amazing how much easier the pattern was. Darwin. After having tried the German patterns where I couldn't really understand it at all, it's like, oh, it's not English, but what a relief. But yeah. It may be a while before I make Darwin again. Simply because, like, if I want a turtle, I'm probably going to go for, like, a more realistic turtle look than this characterized turtle. But I'm glad I made Darwin. Darwin was less annoying than his flavor text suggested. So what did I learn about this whole process? 1, I thought 1 pound of yarn was going to be enough. It was not enough. If I was to do this again, I'd probably make sure I have at least 2 pounds, which was kind of silly. It's kind of silly looking back because, like, I kind of did this to get rid of the 1 pound of green yarn that I had in my stash. Also, most of these patterns, like the second thing that I learned is most of these patterns, if you're going to make a turtle, you want to have at least 2 colors. Because I would say pretty much all of these patterns had a separate color for the shell compared with the underbelly of the turtle, which, I mean, is how it's like in real life, honestly. But, yeah. But, like, I feel like a lot of these patterns would have been more visually interesting, like the patchwork turtle and, like, Charlie here. Ooh. Our little no-sew guy just fell down. Okay. Like, I feel like you could really take advantage of the fact that you have these separate pieces that you have to sew together. If you can sew them together in like a color pattern, you could get a really unique turtle. I mean, Darwin, you saw Darwin, he couldn't be in one color. And 3 is like, it was interesting to see like how the different patterns were like written. Like some of these patterns were definitely better quality than others. Like I would say, I'm finding out that the French crochet book, I don't think it's just me not understanding French. I think that book seriously does not did not write the patterns out very well. Something got lost in translation there. And I don't think it's a translation between me and the book. I think it's a translation between the book and possibly the translator, because I'm not sure if that book was originally in French. But also like the internet patterns, like this one here, especially like there's no way that it would have been named No Sew Turtle with a sewing section in it if it was published in a book. Guaranteed an editor would have caught that. Instead, I'm pretty sure the person just like posted it to the internet themselves, and that's how that got through. That being said, like I've been seeing, like I have like an appreciation for turtles. It'll be nice to make a new animal though. Be nice to make a new animal though. Like I would say this, like the jumbo turtle, has been the most pleasant surprise out of this whole thing. Just like I really love this pattern and I would make it again, and I understand why I'm seeing it all over TikTok now. And then lastly, you may wonder what this had to do with John Green, because I titled the video Turtles All the Way Down. I'm just a fan of Nerdfighteria. This doesn't actually have anything to do with this book. I'm just a really big fan of John Green, and I think he would find the fact that I connected all these turtles to his book very funny. Anyway, as to what I'm going to do with all these turtles, well, I believe Mom has claimed them as her grandkids, so we're stuck with them. But that was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.